Shalom and welcome to another Petach Hamor podcast from Bey Abadan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. It is Friday the 12th of the 12th, 2025. And I have in the studio with me JC. How are you doing, JC? You all right?
I'm very well. How are you, Joe?
Baruch Hashem, I'm doing all right. I've got a bit of a cough, so everybody forgive me. I can't find my cough button. Oh, here it is. There's my cough button. If I remember to press my cough button while we're talking, then uh, that's great. Otherwise, sorry for forgetting to press the cough button. So we're going to be talking about Christians in the Quran right now. I'm also going to stick into the chat here our StreamYard link, although we don't have any live viewers right now. They usually come in about 10, 15 minutes late, and so they'll always miss the beginning of the conversation and they'll always have questions. But here it is. Here's the link if anybody does rewind and decide to start from the beginning. There's the link if you want to join us for questions afterwards. If I know you, of course, and if you are subscribed to the channel, you'll be allowed into the studio. But if you're not subscribed, it'll be a while before you can make a comment, I think, in the chat. So join us in the studio if you have questions afterwards. But we're going to go through the talk of Christians in the Quran. You can join us by clicking the link, which I will put into the chat right now. So there it is. And so JC and I were talking about, specifically, we started with the conversation on Surah 9, verse 30, 31. So, JC, are these Christians?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would like, well, we'll wait for other people as well to join to see if anybody wants to chat. I'll just say very briefly about like my view about all of this. And one of the things that really gets me when reading the Quran is that there are many words that they don't exist before the Quran. They just appear out of nowhere. And that's always a little bit dodgy. So, for example, we have things like, well, Masjid al-Haram, Masjid al-Aqsa, we have Luqman, we have Prophet Saleh, these sort of things. And I think, but this book was actually put together in a Judeo-Christian context. So we should know all of the people, all of the names, all of the sects, everything that the book talks about. We should have references for those things and know them. And one word that people discuss quite a bit is, for example, that word Nasara, and saying, okay, well, that's Christians, except that as far as I can tell, no one called Christians Nasara until the Quran. So if something appears in the Quran and then it makes it into the public, makes me think there is a problem with it. It is mistranslated, misunderstood. Maybe the diacritics are in the wrong place, something like that. And that's how we started the conversation with when it says Nasara, and we can also use Yahudi and the other words that are translated as Christians and Jews. Is it really them? To me, it feels like it's probably not them.
Right, that's right. So let's get that verse. Let's have a look and see. Let's get that verse on the screen. So let's share this and put it on the screen. So this is the verse which triggers the conversation today. And we're using Corpus Quran. We always use Corpus Quran because it's a very well respected website, and it goes word for word, and it's pretty easy to find the mistakes and certain things which are hidden because they're not very sophisticated at hiding certain things, and so there's always a way around of hiding, and you can see when they're hiding stuff. But here it goes through. It says, and the Jews say Uzair ibn Allah. Uzair, or son of God, is Uzair, whatever that is, Uzair. We've had conversations about that in the past. That's the translation, because it says Al Yehud here, and it says Yehudu. Actually, Al Yehudu must be the Jews. That's the standard Islamic narrative. Main problem is that there are no Jews anywhere that we know of in history who have ever said that Uzair ibn Allah. So what on earth are they talking about? Uzair meaning they say that Uzair is actually the Arabic way of saying Ezra the scribe. By the way, the argument for saying that Ezra the scribe, if you're interested, goes down to the word used for in the next verse for their teachers. It uses the word for their teachers is akhbarhum, and they translate that as rabbis, but that's not what it actually says. Akhbar comes from a word meaning scribes. They've taken their scribes And then the other word is Rahmanum, which is supposed to refer to the Christians as lords instead of min duni Allah wal Masih ibn Maryam. They've taken their scribes as lords instead of God and the Messiah, son of Mary. And it's also criticizing the Christians for doing the same thing. It says the Christians, that's the translation. So the Jews have taken Ezra the scribe, that's the argument, as son of God. And the Christians say Messiah is the son of God. And both of them are wrong because they've taken their teachers as lords instead of God and the Messiah, son of Mary. So, what do we do with that?
Well, very interesting, because in Islam, obviously, you cannot say that Lord's Allah and the Messiah. You cannot say that. That is shirk. And it is there when, if we go to like Quran X, almost everybody tries to hide what the verse says, except for I think 2 or 3 translators who actually translate it as it is, which is surprising. But it's just a big no-no in Islam, and it's right there in the
It
Quran.
is right there. It's Surah 9, verse 31. As you said, Islam is against it, but the Quran certainly isn't. So, what does that say? What does that actually say? We've got a problem when the Quran is saying something, but Islam is against that. And of course, there's a lot of somersaults done to try and explain this verse away from what it literally says, even though, of course, Islam likes to boast about how simple the Quran is and its clear, pure Arabic, simple, straightforward language, and that only wicked people try to twist the meaning and take it to mean something else when it's actually very clear. Despite being very proud of the clarity of the Quran, where it actually says they take them besides Allah and the Messiah, son of Mary, Islam is against such a thing. They would say that's shirk. So clearly, I would say the Quran and Islam are on 2 different paths, 2 different religions. And I think you had a guest recently on your show who would agree with us that the path that Islam has taken is different from the path that the Quran is. He was a Quranist, right? I can't remember. Can you remind me a little bit about him? What's his name?
Yes. So Norman, who
Norman.
is Quranist, so he was raised as a Muslim Sunni to begin with, and then he started to realize that the Quran actually says things that really contradict the teachings of Islam.
Yeah.
The stories about Muhammad, they don't really make sense with the story, and he's going down that path of looking at the Quran and saying, but what did it originally say? And concluding that it is something along the lines of Nestorianism.
Well, we would completely agree with Norman that Islam and the Quran have different origins and are different religions. I wouldn't say that the Quran is Nestorian, because the Quran itself is arguing against Nestorianism most of the time. In fact, whenever it talks about saying that God has not taken a son, let's have a look at that page here. Here's an example. Actually, these are 14 places in the Quran where it says that Allah does not take a son. And the word it uses, there's the word walid for son, and the word it uses is itakhida, which is at the top here. These are the different roots. The root is Hamza Khadal. And the fundamental meaning is that it's to take, to adopt. It doesn't mean have. Often they translate he doesn't have a son, but it actually means he doesn't take. It means seize something, to take something, literally to there's something over there and you are grabbing that and bringing it to yourself, which is not the way you have children. You beget children by taking something out of yourself or giving something out of yourself to your spouse, and then your spouse incubates that and it grows into a child. This is not the word you would use. You might say in English, you might talk about taking your wife, for example, meaning in a sexual sense, taking a woman. meaning making her pregnant or something like that. But you don't take your son, so that doesn't work. It might be in English, that this could work in a sexual sense. The verb to take could mean in a sexual sense with taking a spouse, but you can't take a child in the same way. So it just doesn't apply. So they have a serious problem with trying to argue that the Quran says God doesn't have offspring, when the Quran really only says he doesn't take offspring, meaning adopt. And I think we might even have on this page adopt. No, it doesn't have adopt. I can't find
There
that.
is, I think, another verse, unless I'm very much mistaken. I think it is right after the section about Zayd, supposed Zayd, which is probably
Aha.
not there. But I think
Yeah.
it's just immediately after that says, that is basically the narrative says that it forbids adoption. So maybe these two different ideas are linked.
You'll have to remind. I know the verse where it's basically saying that he something his adopted son Zaid. It could mean increase when increase had
Yep.
performed because Zaid means increase, and when increase has performed the necessary rituals, we gave his wife to you, or something like that. There's a passage in the Quran which is talking about that, and the standard Islamic narrative is that this is actually a word. This word increase is not increase; it's actually a name Zaid, who was supposed to be an adoptive son of Muhammad, and Muhammad is supposed to have told Zaid to divorce his wife, and Zaid was his adopted son. And then he married the wife of his adopted son. Basically, argument is that he wanted to have his adopted son's wife, and told his adopted son to divorce his wife so that he could take him. But this narrative is not in the Quran. In the Quran, it just seems to say when increase had occurred, had done what it does, then we gave her to you. And increase here can mean pregnancy. So increase of her womb, for example, her womb grew. When the womb had grown and had shown that she had a child, we said, no, you're not allowed to divorce her. Basically, she remains yours. So there's no indication in the Quranic narrative here on that verse, just to put that concern to rest. There's no indication in the Quranic narrative that this has actually got anything to do with Zayd. Zayd is not a person in the Quran. Zayd is very much a person in the Hadiths, which is an attempt to explain this verse in the Quran, because otherwise it's very peculiar language, very strange use of language, and they don't really know what it means. So they invented the story, I think, of Zayd to try and explain this verse. I think there's something deeper in that verse if we get into it, but that's beside the point right now. So I don't think there's any reference to him being adopted in the Quran. It's just a brief reference to increase doing what it does. But the fact here is that there is this word itakhida, which is to adopt, and it says many times that God does not adopt a son. And here's an example from Surah 17, verse 111, and it says he is not lam itakhid, has taken or adopted walid, offspring. He's not adopted offspring. They never say have, except in one case, which is this one, where they do say if he had offspring, then I would be the first of the worshippers. But it doesn't use the word Allah in this passage here. It uses the word Al-Rahman. Now, I've argued on this channel that Al-Rahman is a reference to the Messiah, and that there's a trinity referred to in the Quran again and again, with Allah as the Father, Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, and then there is the begetter, which is the Holy Spirit, and the begotten, which is the Walid, the Al-Rahman. The Holy Spirit being Rahim, and the begotten Rahman, and hence they have roots here. Quran says, Allah does not beget, neither was he begotten. But then later in Surah 90, is it 91, 93, or maybe it's 90, it says that I swear by the begetter and the begotten, who have to be greater than the narrator of the Quran, which is an angelic being, swearing by something higher than the angelic being. So that has to be something more higher level of angel at the very least, or the Holy Spirit and its offspring. So the begetter is the Holy Spirit, and the offspring is the Messiah. So I say that the Rahman here is a reference to Messiah, but it says if the Messiah had, and that's the word here which you want to see. If you want to say Allah does not have a son, you have to see this word here, which is actually meaning is, but it can mean has in this sense as well. So if is, and it's actually if is to lil Rahman, to Al Rahman, if there is to Al Rahman offspring, then I would be the first of the worshippers. Then I would worship him. I would worship his son. So the word you want really for having a son is kun, ken. The root word is ken, kun. The verb to be, and here is in its form kana, which is the third person masculine perfect tense. So the idea that the Quran is Nestorian is problematic, because otherwise there shouldn't be so many statements against adoptionism, because Nestorianism is adoptionism. They believe that Jesus was 100% human son of Mary, who was adopted, and the position of the Nestorians have changed over time. It used to be that he was adopted at the point of his baptism, and then he was adopted when he was circumcised, and then he was adopted when he was born at the point of his birth, and then finally he was adopted, and this is the final end result of Nestorianism. He was adopted at the point of his conception in the womb, but he was not conceived in any divine way. It was there was no divine father. It was just a miraculous pregnancy, what we would call parthenogenesis or monogenesis in a scientific sense, modern day, which really only happens in rodents and frogs and amphibians and things like that, snakes, reptiles. Sometimes a creature will just become pregnant without having been fertilized beforehand. It can just become pregnant, and it gives birth to its offspring. This is called parthenogenesis or monogenesis. So the idea is that Jesus would be another example of parthenogenesis. Just sometimes, Mary just became pregnant because God can do that. And then at the point of her conception, the baby inside of the womb was adopted as God's adopted son. And that's Nestorianism. And Islam has no problem with the idea. Islam has no problem with the idea that Jesus was a completely normal human being who was simply adopted in a spiritual sense as God's child, in the same way that all prophets could be adopted as God's children. And even humans are not literally God's children, but we may be adopted as his beloved ones because we're his servants, and particularly favorite servant like Abraham adopted Eliezer. Eliezer was Abraham's servant, and Abraham at one point basically adopted him as his son. So in the same way that Abraham adopted Eliezer as his son, and then Allah can adopt humans as his children too. And Islam has no problem with that. But the Quran has a serious problem with that. So we got two problems now. Not just that the Islam would say that taking Jesus and his Jesus as alongside Allah, as it says in Surah 9 verse 31 here, that would be shirk in Islam. But the Quran says no, that's not shirk, that's normal. And Islam says that adopting a son, like it does in Surah 17 verse 111 here, is fine. But the Quran says no, that's not okay. So there's quite a lot of disagreements between the Quran and Islam.
Yes, this one, actually a fun fact is Said Murad in his translation, to make the meaning of this sentence clear, instead of translating it as Allah and the Messiah, he actually translates this as Allah plus the Messiah. And the reason that he does that when that's not the meaning is because like this you can see very clearly that they are attached. And I did look through his translation how many times he uses an expression like that, and he only uses that 5 times, where it's basically a way for him to make sure that the reader sees that you cannot split the sentence in there, and it ends with Allah, and then it says, and the Messiah, blah, 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 doing other things. It's basically, it's not two sentences. The verb is going to be about something else. These two words are joined. And in 5 places, he uses the same technique. I did try to figure them out, and I think there are two. One is this one, and then another one, which are very clearly trying to really hide a little bit the meaning. But then there are the other 3 that I haven't been able to figure out at all. So maybe at one point we could have a conversation about them, because they are basically attaching Allah with something else which Islam very, very strongly denies. So just an interesting thing.
It would be very important and interesting to have a look at those verses, because those verses might be giving more clues to different names for the Messiah or other attributes, maybe the Holy Spirit, something like that. So it'd be very interesting to have a look at that. Now, if we were looking for a Trinitarian origin of the Quran, there should only be 3 things which God would be attached to. If we're looking for a Judaic origin of the Quran, then there's no limit, because God can have as many attributes as he likes. The only problem with the Judaic origin of the Quran is, of course, all the criticism in the Quran against Jews. So, for example, this verse here, where it says that the Jews have taken Ezra as the son of God, and it says at the bottom that that may God destroy them because how deluded they are. Oh, wait a second. It doesn't say Jews, because Jews don't believe that Ezra is the son of God. So maybe the Quran could have been written by Jews after all, but it does look like the word Jews here, al-Yahudu. Looks like it's saying Jews. And the standard narrative is that this verse here, it's 9 chapter 30, is saying Christians. I mean, that's what the translation says here. It says Jews and Christians. We have a serious problem with this, though, because Jews don't believe that Ezra is some kind of unique son of God. Why would we single out Ezra as God's son when Judaism teaches, and actually it's in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, I think it's chapter 4, where God identifies, he says, Israel is my firstborn son. And Israel here, meaning the soul of the Messiah, the soul which the Jewish people are supposed to carry. If we were going to be arrogant and belligerent and bolshy about it and boorish about it, then we might argue that Israel is God's son, because the Torah says so in the book of Exodus chapter 4. We might argue that Israel is God's son, but we would never argue that one particular Jew is uniquely special as God's son, rather than Israel as a whole. If we're going to choose one, we would say Jacob, Israel. We wouldn't choose Ezra. So it's really bizarre that that's making this charge against Jews. Clearly can't be Jews.
The interesting thing is that on the one hand, it says the Jews say that Ezra is the son of God, and it's like, no, they don't. But then it says, and the Nasara say that the Messiah is the son of God, and it's like, yes, they say that.
Yes,
so we do. Have it's the other way around. It's like, it's no, weird. If Nasara means Christians, it's like, yes, that's exactly what they say. So the whole thing is kind of a mess.
It's right. It's like, so if Nasara means Christians, yeah, that's what they say. But then why would the next verse say they've so deluded because they've abandoned Jesus? You know, but it's like, well, they do say that he's the son of God, and why are you then criticizing them in the next verse, saying, oh, they've taken their, in this case, rahbanhum, which is coming from Rabban, which is supposed to be monks. It's actually a Syriac word meaning monks, but it comes from a word for rabbi in Hebrew, rahban, and that is actually the Syriac word for. I think it's not monks. I think it might be actually a word for maybe bishops or something like that. Anyway, the point is, it's a Syriac word. So they've taken their monks as lords instead of God and Messiah. I don't understand. Why didn't the previous verse then say that the monks are the son of God? Right? Because if the argument is that Ezra is what the Jews say is the son of God, then the next verse is kind of in agreement with that. This is what you're kind of referring to, this kind of weirdness. The next verse kind of in agreement with God, because they've taken their, not rabbi, the word here is scribe. So they've taken their scribe as a Lord instead of God and the Messiah. Well, that would mean if the first one is Ezra and the second one is scribe, that's in agreement. They were saying if there were Jews in the world who said that Ezra the scribe is the son of God, then we understand the second verse where it says they have taken their scribe or scribes in place of God and the Messiah, son of Mary. Well, that would mean that the word rahbanhum here, rahban, would have to be a reference to the Messiah being referred to in the previous verse by the Christians. So in the same way that Ezra becomes the scribe, then this Messiah in verse 30 would be the Rahban. And then they would be guilty of taking their scribe and the Rahban in as lords instead of God and the Messiah, son of Mary. So we have to think, well, who's the Rahban then? That these Nasara are taking as Messiah. There's the clue from the text itself. I'm not adding this or taking away from. This is what the text itself would say. If Jews are taking Ezra the scribe as son of God, and they have made their scribes into lords instead of God and the Messiah, son of Mary, then the Messiah referred to in this verse has to be the Rahban. It has to be the Rahban that they're taking in place of Allah and Messiah, son of Mary. Is that clear, do you think? Have I made that point clear, or am I not?
Yeah, it's just a complicated matter because everyone probably watching, we have read this so many times, and we realize that it doesn't really matter how you follow it through. There is a problem there. So, like you said, if you have Ezra and then it says scribes, that makes sense. But then if you have Messiah and then you have monks, that means that that's linked, but it's not linked. It's like there is a problem here in this logic. There is something that doesn't fit.
Yeah. And that usually is a big alarm bell telling us forced meaning. Somebody's trying to force a meaning here, and that's not what the words mean. So I think we've got to look at the word Rahban, and we've got to look at the word Nasara, and then we can only really understand what is the deal, what is the crime that the Nasara are committing, which means that, as it says later in the verse, may Allah destroy them for their crime, which is directly related to the crime of abandoning God and the Messiah, son of Mary. That is the crime. May Allah destroy them because they've abandoned God and the Messiah, son of Mary. And instead of the Messiah, son of Mary and God, they have taken the Rahban as Messiah. Obviously, that's what it's actually saying. So who is this Rahban? That is clear from the text alone, without forcing meanings. That's what the text is saying. If it is rational, if it's not just pure lunacy. And I think, the sad thing is that a lot of the polemicists take the position in fighting against Muslims and saying, your text is nonsense. And the Muslims will say, no, it's not. You're nonsense. It's like, your text is a bloody idiot. No, you're a bloody idiot. Oh, end of story. Both sides says each other is a bloody idiot. End of story. There's just there's no communication between both sides, right? Just, we hate you, you hate us. Let's keep on hating each other. And we think you're morons. And no, you're the morons. And no resolution. There's no investigation by such people. Such people don't investigate. Look, not all Muslims are morons. Not all Christians are morons. Not all of them are idiots. The text had to make sense to somebody once upon a time. It had to have meaning, otherwise it would never have become popular. Remember, you're trying to make this text popular with people who are skeptic. Everybody, when you come into them, even on this channel, this is a missionary channel. I push Noahide Judaism here all the time. And people are very suspicious. It's skeptical. The first position they have is skepticism. It's like, well, prove it to me. Wait a second. I've done the research. I've checked out the sources here. You're not right because the source says this, that, the other. So you're trying to convert people with this new message from God. And in your message, you're saying that there is a group of people called Nasara, and they are guilty because they've taken their Rahban as a lord instead of God and the Messiah, son of Mary. And the people are not going to check them and say, no, let me check that with somebody. I'll go and check with a Nasara. Hey, Nasara, Nasri. Actually, the word is Nasri. Look, here it is with a yod at the end. That's actually Nasri. Natsri. Hey, Natsri, is it true that you have taken a Rahban as Messiah? And if the Natsri says no, then you're going to go back and you're going to say, this book's nonsense, and nobody's going to convert. I mean, your main point of arguing for your new religion is that it's better than the religion of the Natsri, and it's better than the religion of the Yahudu. So the people are going to go and check the Nazis and say, did you say this? And they say no. They say, well, that's a ridiculous new religion then. Let's not get interested. They're also going to go and check with the Yahudi and say, do you take Ezra? And they're going to say, the Jews are going to say no. And they're going to say, well, that's a nonsense book then. Unless Yahud doesn't refer to Jews and Natsri doesn't refer to Christians. In which case, they'll go to the Natsri and they'll say, yes, we do take Rahban as our Messiah. In which they can say, well, the Quran's right. I've got a point against you. You should be focused on Jesus and Allah. And they're going to go to the Yahud, who are not Jews, and they're going to say, do you take Ezra as a scribe instead of God? And they're going to say, yes, we do. And they're going to say, well, the Quran's got a point against you there. So there's got to be some basis to it. It's extremely insulting to the Arab people to say that they were so thick and so stupid that none of them, not a single convert to Islam ever, none of them ever checked a simple claim like this, which defines Christians and Jews in the Quran. The definitive doctrinal passage which really clarifies who these people are is Surah 9, verse 30 and 31, because Surah 9 is what they call the war surah, the surah which is telling you now, go and kill these people, right? And so are you really such a complete and utter cretin that you're not going to go and check, hold on, before I go and kill these people, maybe I should just make sure that they are actually guilty of the crime that they've been accused of? Not even one person is going to say that and say, look, this is nonsense. If you had people who hated the other group so much that they were prepared to go and kill them without evidence, then you wouldn't even need a Quran. Right?
Yeah, but also if we look, for example, at a map of just Christendom, we know that lots of those lands, they had been Judaized and they had been Christianized, including the Arabian Peninsula. These people understood these traditions. I mean, the Quran is full of stories, Christian legends and Jewish legends. People were very familiar with these stories. So even if we ignore the second section, the first one about they have taken Ezra or Uzziah in here as the son of God, that you would never be able to sell that. These lands had been Christianized. So if you use then the polemic of, no, because they are creating something new and they just want to basically say we are complete monotheists, and we have the Christians who say that the Messiah is the Son of God, so we're attacking them for that reason. We need to create something similar about the Jews. So we're going to say, yeah, they say that Ezra is the Son of God. But like you said, those people, they knew that that is a false claim. So it wouldn't have worked, and the words that they stick out, they have to be the ones translated as Jews and Christians. And that seems to be like the whole problem. And also, as well, if we take into account that the Quran elsewhere in Surah 3, verse 55, is when Allah said to Jesus, I will cause you to die and raise you to myself, and I will make those who follow you superior to those who disbelieve until the day of judgment. There's a very clear verse that is basically actually acknowledging as well the death of Jesus. But at that point, Christendom was massive. So there wouldn't be a confusion as to who the Christians, the majority Christians are. They would know. So the Nasara cannot be those who would be superior until the day of judgment.
Right.
If at the same time is going to be criticizing them and saying, oh, aren't they deluded? It's like we have a problem between those who follow Jesus, who in a verse that says that he dies, and the Nasara who say that he is the Son of God. There is a disparity there.
Yes, this is a major point you've come up here. They are superior to anybody who disbelieves until the day of judgment, and yet the Nasara, And there it says, and I've got it on the screen now, Surah 3, verse 55, superior to the disbelievers until judgment day. And then suddenly, like some kind of insane contradiction here, saying, oh, may Allah curse them. Oh, they're so wrong because they've abandoned God and the Messiah. Weird. I mean, if you are the kind of bloodthirsty, war seekers, looking for a fight, you're going to be too thick to read this or even listen to this. You don't need somebody to incite you and say stuff because you're just going to go and fight them anyway. You don't need a book to convince you, right?
Yeah. In fact, all that in history, the main thing, the number one thing is those guys there, they're going to come and take our lands. So let's go and take their lands, and we're going to have slaves and stuff. That's how it's been in human history.
Right.
All that you have to do is point the finger at those guys, and then you rally your armies. You're not going to go through the whole process of giving them all of this information, because in the end, imagine that you're talking with pagans. They have no idea what you're talking about. And if you're speaking with Jews or Christians, they know that you're lying. So it wouldn't work as an actual strategy to get people on your side. Quite the opposite.
Exactly. I mean, what is we talking about? How many verses are there in the Quran? There's like 6,236 verses in the Quran. 6,236 verses to convince people who all you had to do was point and say, let's get them. All right. So your audience is clearly an audience which needs to be convinced with 6,236 verses. They're not your average criminals, because a criminal doesn't need any convincing. Just say, let's go and kill them. You say, yeah, let's do it. So you've got to convince these people with such a long argument of 6,000 more verses. And your part of your argument is saying how wonderful these people are. They're amazing. These Christians are amazing. These followers of Jesus, they're superior until the day of judgment. And then you're saying the Christians are cursed because they've taken somebody as a Messiah instead of Jesus and the Messiah, Jesus and Allah. Okay. All we can conclude with absolute certainty here is that whoever these Natsri are, and that's the word which is there, Nasra actually says Natsri, okay? Whoever these Natsri are, when they say Messiah ibn Allah, they're not talking about Jesus, son of Mary. That's absolutely clear, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would say so, because otherwise, who on earth is this? And those Natsri are people that can be identified as people who don't follow Jesus. Just like the Yahud are clearly people who do not follow Jesus, and they also have something called Uzair, which they take as a son of God instead of Jesus. So I don't think we're talking about Jews or Christians here, but the key question here is who on earth are these Christians? But the answer is given the name. I mean, the name is Natsri. That is the word Natsri here, Natsri.
Okay. Actually, another thing that I've just remembered that I think may be a very important clue. There is, I think, a verse in the Quran that says the Nasara, they are the closest to God, or something like this.
Closest to you.
On the one, so if on the one hand it says that the Nasara are the closest, but then in another verse it says those who follow Jesus will be superior to those who disbelieve. It's almost like they are two different groups. The Nasara are quite close, but they're not the ones that are going to be superior until the day of judgment.
Right.
And again, if we look at the map, Christendom, it would be quite clear to these people who the bulk of Christians were. It wouldn't be a small sect. So I think the Nasara cannot be those understood as those who follow Jesus.
Exactly. And that reminds me of this verse here, which is not too far away from the one we were just looking at just now in Surah 3, verse 55. Here we have in Surah 3, verse 52, just a few verses before it says that they are superior until the day of judgment. It actually gives the name in the Quran for Christians. This is actually the word given to those people in the Christian. It's called Ansar, Ansari. Now, in the Hadiths, the Ansar are a tribe from Yemen who were very friendly to the Prophet, blah, blah, blah. And the reason is because in the Quran, whenever it talks about the Ansar, it says how great they are, how wonderful they are, how lovely they are. So the word given for the followers of Jesus just before saying that they are superior until the end of time basically is Ansar. It says, and when Jesus perceived from them, the people he's speaking to, disbelief, he said, well, who will be my helpers? Who will be Ansar-i, my helpers to God? And then al-Hawariyun, the disciples. That's the correct word, not apostles, as the Indonesians always try to translate it, to try and limit it to 12 people. It doesn't say apostles. That would be mursalin, that would be apostles. It uses the word Hawariyun, which means all of the disciples, thousands of people who followed Jesus. Thousands of people said, we will be Ansar. We will be the Ansar. So the disciples became the Ansar. That's the Christians of Allah, God's Ansar. And we believe in God and we bear witness that we are Meshulamim, Muslims, perfect. Meshulam is perfect. This word is also in Isaiah when it says, who is my blind and deaf prophet or messenger? And it says, who is like him? And it's the word Meshulam is used to name that person. Now, the word Meshulam has a very specific meaning in Judaism. It refers to somebody who is in covenant with God. They are at peace with God. There's the word shalom. The root word salim is not the root of Islam. The root word is salam, which means peace. You ask Muslims, sometimes when they're talking to the cameras, they'll say, our religion is a religion of peace. Islam comes from peace. It's all about salam. Muslim is salam. The root is salam, 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 salam. When you have them in their secret groups, not all Muslims, of course, small groups of fanatical people, they say, no, the root word is salim, which means to surrender. And we have to force all the people in the world to surrender because we have surrendered. And it's salim is what you say when you point a gun in somebody's head. And you say surrender, and that's the word you would use. Or if you were in the olden days, you put a knife to their throat and say salim, and they would surrender. So it means basically the religion of military surrender. In secret, amongst the cells of the fanatics, that's what they say. But in public, and most normal Muslims out there will say it's the religion of salam, not salim. Salam. The root is salam, not salim. And salam is exactly cognate with the Hebrew word shalom. And shalom is the same root as the word meshulam, which means somebody who is in covenant with God, somebody who is perfect and complete in covenant with God. They have kept their covenant with God. We say such people are perfect. Why does it say they're blind in Isaiah? Why does it say these people who are in covenant with God are blind? Because it means that these are people who don't know the scriptures. They don't know anything about religion of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They simply are somehow in covenant with God. And that is the bare minimum. That means they keep the bare minimum, even without knowing religion. Now, clearly here, the disciples of Jesus know about the religion of God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're followers of Jesus. They're very informed. They are also Meshulam. So that's true. What is it that makes one kind of Meshulam blind and another kind of Meshulam sighted? And the answer is, how much do they know about the scripture? But you don't even have to know anything about the scripture in order to be Meshulam, in order to be in covenant with God. So which covenant are we talking about? We're talking about the covenant of Noah. That's the 7 colors of the rainbow, standing for the 7 laws of Noah. The 7 laws are: don't kill, don't steal, don't be sexually immoral, don't blaspheme, don't worship idols, don't be unjust, and don't be cruel to animals. Those are the 7 laws of Noah. And so anybody, anywhere in the world, throughout time, with no knowledge of the Bible or the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in other words, completely blind to the religion, is still Meshulam, is still Muslim, in the Judeo-Arabic sense of the word, is still Meshulam as long as they keep these 7 laws of Noah. And if you do know about the religion of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you still keep these 7 laws, then Baruch Hashem, praise the Lord, hallelujah, you're not just Meshulam, but you're also sighted Meshulam, because you can see the scripture as well. So there you go. The Meshulam here refers to what we call in modern English Noahides, or in the biblical language, Hagerim, which is where you get the word Hagarin from. Hagarin is from Hagerim. So they're basically saying we're Hagarim. And why are they Hagarim? Hagarim is aren't they Jews? Doesn't the word ger mean convert? That's true. Ger has been translated as convert, but it's not an accurate translation because ger is a category of a kind of Jew. We have 10 types of Jew, and one of the types of Jew is ger, which means somebody who is behaving as a convert, who doesn't focus on their blood lineage, who is not obsessed with their DNA, who is not caring about the fact of whether they had Jewish parents or not. The important thing for the ger category of Jews is that you have made a commitment to God. I was born as a Jew. I was brought up as a secular person. I had no knowledge of Judaism. As an adult, I came to Judaism and was accepted as a Jew in the Jewish community. But when it came time to get married, arose a question: what kind of Jew am I? There are 10 types of Jew. This is called yichus. There are 10 groups of yichus. Which group of yichus do I belong to? Because if you're from one kind of yichus, you cannot marry a Jew from another kind of yichus. There are certain groups which come together. There are 3 major groupings of Jews. You can regard it as a kind of caste system which exists in Judaism, where if you belong to one particular caste, you can marry somebody from another particular caste. Like if you're from the priestly caste, you can marry into the priestly caste, or you can marry into the warrior caste, but you can't marry into the untouchable caste, right? That's in Hinduism. Similar in Judaism. You've got 3 major castes. They're caste group A, or Aleph, caste group Bet, B, and caste group C, or Gimel, originally Gimel. So you've got Aleph, Bet, Gimel, 3 groups. And if you belong to any of the castes in group A, you can marry each other. If you belong to any of the castes in group B, you can marry each other. And if you can belong to any of the castes in group C, you can marry each other. But you can't always marry across the group. You can't always marry across the group unless you're a ger. A ger is allowed to marry across all groups. That's interesting. That's very good. So ger is allowed to marry across all groups. So it's the best kind of caste to have in Judaism is to be ger, which means you become hagerim as opposed to regular Jews. If you're hagerim, in other words Hagarin, then you can marry any kind of Jew. You can marry in group Aleph, Bet, and Gimel. So when it was time for me to get married, the question arose concerning my yichus, and we couldn't identify which yichus I came from. The suggestion was, the theory was, or the fear was, I might be in the group or the caste called Mamzer, which means I wouldn't be allowed to marry anybody in group Aleph or Bet, in group A or B. So the solution is for me to get baptized as a ger, and then I can be marrying anybody. Remember what Jesus' disciples were famous for and how the disciples followed Jesus in the first place? They were all following John the Baptist. John the Baptist's job is basically cleaning up people's yichus. He was cleaning people's yichus, and I went to a matbil. A matbil means a Baptist in Judaism. So John the Baptist was following the job as John the matbil. And I went to the matbil and I got baptized as a Jew, even though I was a Jew, in order to clarify my yichus. And I became a ger, and now I can marry any Jew. You see? So that's what it was. So they're becoming gerim. They've all been baptized. They've all become gerim. And the ger, of course, means Noahide. And the Noahides are the Meshulamim, and they're the ones who keep the covenant of Noah as the bare minimum law, but they also add more as well. But the bare minimum law is the 7 laws of Noah. So Jesus' disciples here are the Hagerim, who are in covenant with God. And the title given to them is, we will be Ansar. And there's the word which is given to him. Sorry for the long conversation there, but I hope I made some clear points and made it easy for people to understand exactly who Jesus' disciples are, at least from the Judeo-Christian context. Remember, the first century followers of Jesus were all Jews going through baptism. What does it mean, Meshulam? And I hope I managed to clarify that.
Yeah, actually, well, some of the things that you said, they are very interesting. And I think I will ask you some questions about like Jewish baptism, because I had never actually heard about that, but maybe we have that conversation
Yeah.
some other time. Very exciting. Now, in here, then, when it says actually Muslims, this is a topic that has always been a bit annoying for me, because I see that Muslims would describe what is to be a Muslim in different manners. Many of them, they will say basically what the narrative says. You have to just basically say the Shahada, which is Allah and Muhammad, period. But then because it gets into the whole polemics of, but hang on a minute, why would the Quran say that the Hawariyun and Muslims, if this is before Muhammad? It wouldn't make any sense. Then it becomes, no, it means submitting to the one God. And it's like, okay, so people who submitted 100% to Baal, are they Muslims? And it's like, no, 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 it has to be the one true God. And he's like, but how do you know who is the one true God? Oh, because
Exactly.
Muhammad told me. And he's like, you are having a big problem in here. So if we go with the meaning, before you said that the meaning is as well something to do like perfect.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, in covenant with
So,
God. So you haven't broken your covenant. In other words, you're still perfect. You're still in covenant with God. So this meshulam, it means paid. Actually, it actually means paid. So you have this concept of atonement, right? Kippur, which is to pay. You have to pay. By the way, do you know the word kafir, kofir, non-believer, comes from this same root of Kippur, as in Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It means that you're somebody who needs atonement. You're in need of atonement. It doesn't actually mean non-believer. It means somebody who needs to pay. And when you pay, when the penalty has been paid for you, when you have been atoned, then you are meshulam. So that's the word. So you're either kafir, needing atonement, or you're meshulam. Sorry, that's kofir in Hebrew. Kafir is Judeo-Arabic. You know, I use Judeo-Arabic interchangeably with Hebrew on this channel. So kofir is Hebrew, or kafir, means you need atonement, and meshulam means you don't need atonement. You're perfect. You're clear. Your account is settled. You are meshulam. So that's what it means.
right. So then let me see if I got this straight. Then if we use this term and then we apply it like the Quran will say of different people at different times, it would make sense if we just take the meaning of, say, perfect or paid,
Yeah.
or within the
Yeah.
covenant. So then Noah would be Muslim. It's like, yes, at
Yeah.
that point, he's fine. And also Abraham and also Moses and so on, as opposed to being something that has a very different meaning later, that people have to decide does it have something to do with Muhammad or not, and they try to retrofit what it actually means, when the meaning would be, it is almost like being on the last covenant up to that point. So Noah is in perfect communion with the covenant up to his point. He doesn't know what happens later. Just like when Abraham, it says Abraham is not an Asara and he's not a Yahudi, but he was a Muslim. And it's like, that would make sense. At that point, he has all of the information up to his point, and as opposed to being, the term how it is used now. Am I understanding the meaning correctly?
Close enough. The key point which we have to come back from when it says Abraham was Muslim, right? Meshulam is meaning he is still in the covenant of Noah. He's had his debt paid. He's atoned by the covenant of Noah. He keeps the 7 laws of Noah. So always it means, in every generation, it always means somebody who is keeping the 7 laws of Noah. And by the way, that means that in the world today, every human being on the planet, whether they know that it's called the 7 laws of Noah or not, whether they know about Judaism or not, okay, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. They could be Buddhists or Australian Aborigines or some kind of tribe from the Amazon rainforest, as long as they feel inside their hearts, nah, I'm not going to kill, I'm not going to steal, I'm not going to be sexually immoral, I'm not going to blaspheme, I'm not going to worship idols, I'm not going to be unjust, and I'm not going to be cruel to animals. Anybody who feels like that is Meshulam, is in the covenant of Noah from the Judaic point of view. So yes, Noah was, Abraham was, and anybody, all of them were.
Right. So do you think that when this book was written, they actually had that very clear understanding, and that's what they were
Certainly.
conveying? Okay.
Yeah, I
So
do. I
it
mean,
hadn't,
people. Yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, carry on.
It hadn't morphed into a different meaning of the word. At that point, they still meant the 7 laws of Noah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this first reference to now, the best person who's got the history of this in his memory is Ghost Butterflies. He's on the channel sometimes. I don't know if you've met him. But he's a good, an excellent. He has an excellent retention for the historical stages. But it was Augustine of Hippo who makes reference to. Let me check the date of Augustine of Hippo for you now. So if you just bear with me, I'll just check his date, unless somebody in the chat wants to add it before I do. So Augustine of Hippo dates. Where is his dates? Where are his dates? All right. So he was a bishop from 396 until 430. That's a long time before Islam. And Augustine of Hippo is already making reference to the 7 laws of Noah in his writings, and basically arguing that this is the same basis of the book of Acts of the Apostles. In the book of Acts of the Apostles, chapter 15, verse 15, when it talks about the remnant of Edom, the remnant of man, it says, right unto the remnant of Edom. That's from Amos chapter 9. We know that the reference in Acts 15 is actually the remnant of man, where it mentions the remnant of men. It's actually from Amos. Write unto them and tell them basically to keep these 7 laws of Noah. Actually, it only mentions 6 of the laws, but the 7th against theft is understood in the Roman Empire to have been avoided because people used to get crucified for being thieves, right? So only 6 of the 7 are mentioned. The 7th is, by context of the time, everybody knew that was something to be avoided. So there's no need to obviously state the obvious, right? But I've just given 2 Christian sources for the 7 laws of Noah. I gave Augustine of Hippo, and I gave the book of Acts. And I didn't give any Judaic source. Well, before the Quran, we did have the Talmud already in existence, both the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud, which also mention the 7 laws of Noah. Now, you might argue, hold on, the Talmud is after Augustine of Hippo and after the book of Acts. But are you really seriously going to argue that the Jews therefore took the concept of the 7 laws of Noah from Christianity? No. So all we have in the fact that the Christian references are on paper older than the Jewish references on paper is basically a proof and an independent Christian corroboration of the historical fact that Judaism has always had this concept, at least as early as the book of Acts. Otherwise, the Christians in the book of Acts wouldn't have been making use of the Pharisaical oral Torah concerning the 7 laws of Noah for mankind. So, of course, Judaism argues that this is what we call derech eretz. This was the way of the world before the Torah was revealed. For 26 generations, everybody was following derech eretz before the Torah was revealed at Mount Sinai. That's what Judaism teaches. It's a fundamental teaching of Judaism. I mean, there are so many fundamental teachings of Judaism, and that's why it's difficult to learn Judaism, but it's not one of those religions you can sum up in one sentence, right? It takes 7 years to learn Judaism. So, 7 years of serious, devoted study. It's like a PhD or something. You go to a bachelor's degree and then you do your master's degree and you do your PhD. That in total is 7 years. If you do all 3 years bachelor's degree, 1 year master's degree, and a 3-year PhD, you've got 7 years of study. So essentially, everybody who converts to Judaism has to be a PhD in Judaism, and that's all there is to it. So, but there are too many fundamental points of Judaism, and this idea that the derech eretz was the way of the world, and that's literally what the derech eretz means. It means the way of the world. It means derech is way, eretz is world. So the way of the world was the 7 laws of Noah for 26 generations before the Torah was revealed. And the Torah was given only to those people at Mount Sinai, specifically the children of Israel, while the rest of the world was expected to continue in the derech eretz, the 7 laws of Noah. So, that's Meshulam. Yeah, that is indisputable that Judaism has always been promoting this concept. At least Christians have to agree, as long as there has been the Book of Acts. Did it come
Well,
from the disciples, or did it come from the Pharisees that the disciples were on the side of against the Sadducees? We say Pharisees. Sorry.
and all of this actually would, to me at least, it makes like perfect sense. When we look at the Quran using this word, there is only two possible reasons as to why that word is there. Number one is that Islam has already been created, and then they are shoehorning that back, which is very
Mm.
unlikely because we have manuscripts and so on, so incredibly unlikely. Or number two, that it is another concept. It is not how it is used now, and it was a very inclusive concept that you could actually use with Abraham, with Noah, with
Hmm.
Moses, with Jesus, with however, but it has nothing to do with how they twisted the meaning of that word later as part
Right.
of the creation of the religion. So that would make sense. And here we are in the 21st century with Muslims saying Abraham was a Muslim and Jesus was a Muslim and everybody was a Muslim, and it's like
Mm.
you are partially right, actually.
Hmm. Yeah, if you know the historical, what they would call the Judeo-Christian religious, socio-religious context, the milieu, then you're right. They were all Meshulam or Judeo-Arabic Muslim, but they were not Muslim with all the baggage which has been added to it by the Abbasids and everybody who came after them. No, that's a different kind of thing which has been invented. But yes, they were all Muslim in the Judeo-Arabic sense. They were all Meshulam in the biblical sense. Yes, there's no doubt about it. And here they also call themselves Ansar. And there's that word Ansar, which appears many, many times in the Quran. There are too many verses in the Quran. And we're probably interested in those passages of which actually mention Ansar. I think there are a few. Find Ansar.
Okay, and I see translated as helpers, helpers. Do you think that in any case this could be a call to the spirit as helper, or the or something like that?
I think it's a reference. I think it's basically the Quranic word for, yeah, it is helpers. It definitely means helpers, and it's the Quranic word for the Christian. That's actually the Quranic word for Christian. Now we're still stuck though. We haven't got the answer to this question here. Now Nasra looks like it's from the same root. It's You've
Right.
got the Nasr sort of root there, but this is Notsri. It's a very different word from Ansar. Ansar are God's helpers are mentioned throughout the Quran, and the Muslims are called God's helpers, or is it that God's helpers are called Muslims? Yeah. Anyway, the Quran is definitely from those Christians, those people who are called the Ansar. The Islamic narrative says the Ansar are a tribe from Yemen. We know all that, but we're avoiding the Islamic narrative because it was invented by Abbasids 200 years later to muddy the waters and confuse everything. But here, this group, the Nasara, are very clearly not the helpers. We can't say it's from the same root just because it looks like Nasr. It's not from the same root. These people are deluded, and may Allah destroy them, it says. You know how deluded they are. They're disbelievers. They're in need of atonement. That's the word there, kafru. That's the word kofir, meaning, as in Kippur. They need Kippur. They haven't paid the debt. They're in debt. Okay, they are debtors. And that's really, it doesn't mean coverers. I mean, it can mean coverers, and you have to cover your bill, right? So you need to cover your debt, and so you can got the word cover, and cover, which is a convenient English word to help you remember. But you have to think of it in terms of debt, covering your debt, right? So they need to cover their debt. They're in debt. They need to pay up. They need to become meshulam. They need to become perfect. And that's clearly not the Nasara, who are already meshulam. They're already perfect, right? The Ansar, sorry. The Ansar in Surah 3, verse 52, the Ansar have paid their meshulam. They've paid their debt. But the Nasara in Surah, here it is, Surah 9:30, the Nasara are kafir. They haven't paid their debt. right? This is not the same people. So,
Right.
who are these Natsri?
So actually, if in this verse, instead of saying the Nasara are saying this, if instead of that it said Ansar, we would have, it would be the problem. It would be, oh, now this is attacking Christians. If Ansar or Ansara is Christians, but then this is a different group
Yes,
that they haven't paid, as in they are not in the covenant.
right. They're outside the covenant. So the Ansar, the followers of Jesus who are superior to the disbelievers until the day of judgment, in Surah 3, verses 50 until 52, 53, 54, 55, okay? The Ansar, they are Meshulam, they've paid, they are atoned. But the Nasra, they haven't paid. They're kafir. They need atonement. They're not atoned yet. They're still in need of atonement. It's different. If you understand so this is what we're doing is like a literary linguistic analysis of these verses, and it's clear that there's a problem, right? There's a difference between these two. And yet Ansar is translated as helpers and Nasri is translated as Christians instead of the other way around. Perhaps these guys are not called helpers, but they're certainly not called Christians. As for the helpers, they are clearly the Christians. They're clearly the disciples of Jesus. They're clearly the people who have been atoned, Meshulam. They've paid their debt. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then these people are being criticized, whoever this group is, when they are saying the Messiah is the Son of God, and they're saying, no, they are wrong. Just like saying the Jews say that Ezra is the Son of God, and it's like they are wrong. So,
and
but
why
what
are
I
they
don't
wrong?
understand is, sorry, I think I actually got lost. We discussed this one before, but now with this part of the conversation, I got a little bit confused. So Nasara,
Yeah.
if it was meant to be, say, Christians,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have had a problem saying the Messiah is the Son of God.
Right. But these guys are lost because when they say Messiah is Son of God, they don't mean Messiah, Son of Mary. They mean somebody else.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
That's why they're lost. That's why they're lost. So their Messiah is some Rahban who is not Jesus. That's the issue here. So we need to identify who these people are. Now, Odon LaFontaine calls them the Judeo-Nazarenes, and he likes to say that Islam began with the Judeo-Nazarenes. And I'll agree with him and say that's absolutely correct. But we've seen here that there's a massive difference between Islam and the Quran. The Quran says Messiah, Son of Mary, and Allah. Islam says that's shirk. Islam says it's okay to adopt a son, but as long as you don't say that God actually has a divine son. He just adopted us like Abraham adopted Ezra. Quran says no, that's not allowed. So Islam was founded by the Nasra, the Judeo-Nazarenes, as Odon LaFontaine says. Yes, correct. The Quran was written by the same people? No way. It's impossible to imagine that two completely different positions are the sources of both Islam and the Quran. The fact is, Islam has a different source and the Quran has a different source from Islam. They have different sources from each other. The Quran uses the term Ansar for Christians. Islam uses the term Ansar for a tribe from Yemen. There's too many differences between Islam and the Quran. What people haven't really got yet is they haven't divorced the origin of the Quran from the origin of Islam. That's the main problem. But if people can get that point in their heads and say, okay, right, we've got to face the reality is that the Quran has a different origin from Islam. Odon LaFontaine is correct. Islam has its origins with the Judeo-Nazarenes, but the Quran certainly does not. We need to find out who is behind the Quran. And I say that the people here being criticized are exactly the Judeo-Nazarenes. Now, the Judeo-Nazarenes, I don't know if Odon knows this or not because I haven't bothered getting to know much more of his thesis. Since I was never interested in the origins of Islam, I was always interested only in the origins of the Quran, and so we really have got different projects we're working on. I'm not interested in his project, although it's relevant now to look at. But the fact of the matter is that the Judeo-Nazarenes were a sect of Jews, and they had nothing to do with Christians. In fact, the sect of Judeo-Nazarenes have ancient origins, long, long time ago, way back in time. Would you like me to show you where?
Sure.
Okay. Here we go. We're looking at this first here. This is the Book of Kings. Second Kings, actually. There's just 2 Kings. I'm on Bible Hub right now.
So that's a little bit before Islam.
A little bit. I mean, we're talking more than 1,000 years before. This is a long time ago. This is how long exactly? So if Islam is the 7th century, 2 Kings. Let's get the exact timing of the two Kings. Is telling the story about. It's after David. It's about the 700 BC. It's before the invasion before the Assyrian invasion. Let's have a check and see when is 2 Kings covering what time. So we work out the exact time. Okay, let's see if the AI has got the answer. Yeah, okay, right. So the two Kings, Book 2 Kings, covers the years between the years 853 BC to 586 BC. And we're in the beginning of the book of 2 Kings. 2 Kings have got many chapters. Let's see how many chapters 2 Kings has got. It's got 25 chapters. Oops, is that 25 chapters there? 25 chapters. And that would be taking us up to the Babylonian exile. And is there anything else at the end of the chapter? Let's just have a look at the very end of the last chapter of Kings. I think it's up to the Babylonian exile, so we'll just confirm that with us now, because I can't expect me to hold everything in my brain. So Nebuchadnezzar seizes Jerusalem. This is the last chapter. Babylonian invasion of Jerusalem, of Israel, of Judah. And it ends with Jehoiakim, and that is it. And then it goes into Chronicles. So Islam is 600 CE, say the 7th century. The Babylonian invasion was, but that's the end of the Book of Kings. We're kind of in the middle of the Book of Kings. We're around the year 700, like I said earlier. Chapter 17, Book of Kings, is about the year 700. So it's 14 centuries difference. It's as far away from this reference to the Nazrim in the Book of Kings. Islam is as far away from that as we are away from the origins of Islam. 1400 years difference. 1400 years. Think about how different the world is now, 1400 years on from Islam, when it was established 1400 years ago. That's how different, Islam is from the origins of the Nazrim. But the people, the sect of the Nazrim, the Judeo-Nazarenes, and it's important to make that point that this is also like 700 years before Christianity, because people think Nazarene, that means Christian, right? Because Jesus of Nazareth, or Jesus the Nazarene. But you have to remind yourself, wait a second. Nazarene, the people of the Nazarene people existed, and Jesus came from the Nazarene people. And by the way, the Nazarene people were not regarded as anything particularly good. Remember what his disciples said when they said he comes from Nazareth. He said, "Can any good come from Nazareth?" What? From the Nazarenes of Nazareth? That's like, no, there's nothing good from that place. By the way, I should also say that I'm a Nazarene because on my Israeli passport, you have to identify your place of residence. And I was living in Upper Nazareth. We call it Nazareth Elite. It's now changed its name to Nof HaGalil. But in those days, it was called Upper Nazareth or Nazareth Elite. And so I was put down as a Nazarene. So can any good come from Nazareth? The answer is still no good. Still no good comes from Nazareth. Sorry. It's a rotten place. And remember that Jesus of Nazareth, when he went back to Nazareth, he couldn't perform any signs there because nobody believed in him. He said it'd be easier. I can't remember which towns he said. Was it for Tyre and Sidon than it will be for Nazareth on the day of judgment, because it's just a rotten place full of rotten people. Although, actually, you know what? It's not full of rotten people. There are so many lovely people in Nazareth, and both Arabs and Jews and Druze and all kinds of people there. They're lovely, but lovely people struggling in a mess. That's unfortunately the situation there. So, I'm also a Nazarene. And can any good come from Nazareth? Well, at least there are 6 people watching right now who maybe think that we're saying something useful. So, Baruch Hashem. The point is that Nazarenes existed a long time before Christians. I mean, 700 years at least before Christians, and they also existed 1400 years before Muslims. But Alden Lafontaine is correct. These people are the ones who are responsible for the founding of Islam. So the sect of Judaism, which established all those rotten laws in Islam, of the Sharia of Islam, which, Lloyd de Jong likes to talk about, the Sharia of the Shafi Sharia. All of this is basically the version of Judaism as taught by the Notzrim. They were not very nice people. Okay, they were militaristic. They were belligerent. They also worshipped their caliphs. In this case, the people who sat on the throne, or at least in the position of successor to David. Successor. There was the word caliph, right? They sat on the throne as successor to David, and they basically worshipped that successor as God's son. It didn't matter who that person was, because they had the right DNA, they had the royal blood, and therefore they had the right of kings, and therefore whatever they say, that's the truth. Now, did they follow Jesus of Nazareth? They certainly did, when Jesus of Nazareth was the only prominent son of David making waves in the year 30 AD, 30 CE. When Jesus was making waves at that time, they would have said, "Here he is. This is the Messiah of our generation." But when Jesus of Nazareth was crucified, they would have looked for the next one, because they don't care about people who've died. They care about who is alive right now. Who is the Messiah right now? That's the only important one to them.
Right.
The
Almost
Rahman.
like a king, like we would see it in a normal kingdom,
Right.
where you go, okay, the king passes away and then the son takes over, and is that level of succession, as opposed to something that would happen at a particular point in time, which is as well what you said about Islam. That's actually, yeah, I had actually made the connection more like towards the Persians, even though there is no connection there, but the old Persians as the ruler, acting as though he is the representative of the gods on earth, just
Right.
like the Egyptians. Something like this is, who is the guy that is who holds the keys to the heavens, and
Yeah.
in Islam it becomes the caliph.
Yeah.
But it is from, instead of a Persian tradition or an Egyptian tradition, from Judeo-Christian belief, where you will still have a king on earth, and that's the guy that you have to follow. And the moment that Jesus is gone, is like, okay, who's next?
That's right.
Mm.
So here, the best way and the correct way to review the word Messiah in Surah 9, verse 30, the word Messiah here, for the Nasra, for the Notzri, that is for these people, mentioned in 2 Kings. Oh, I should explain that it says here watchtower, and a lot of people would just be saying, "Oh, that says watchtower. You're some kind of moron, can't you tell? It says watchtower. It doesn't say it's a people, you moron." I have to point out to them that I actually do know Hebrew. Well, such people don't know Hebrew. And this word is not watchtower. This word actually means something like guardians or protectors or hiders. Actually, the word is actually rooting of hide here, and it's a pun. They translate it in English as watchmen, but it's actually
You're saying,
hiders. Sorry.
like you said guardians, and that's actually not even that far off from helpers. Like
Helpers,
to
not
a
too
degree,
far away. Yeah.
if you stretch a little bit, the meaning is on the ballpark.
Yeah, it's in the ballpark, and that could be where the confusion comes from. The difference is this vav here changes the meaning from actually being Nazarene. You take this vav, this letter which I've highlighted, take it away, and it says Netzarim, which means Nazarenes, and Jesus was a Nazarene. But you put the vav in, and it changes the meaning slightly to being from being Nazarene. It's kind of a pun. This, you know how much we love puns in Judaism, right? Everything's got to be a pun. Same in the Quran. Everything has to be a pun. So this word now no longer means Nazarene exactly, but it means occultist. Just by putting one vav in, people who do things and who hide things and who do hidden things. And in fact, the verse says that they were the sons of Israel who secretly did things against the Lord, and that's what the Septuagint translation still says. When you go back to the Septuagint translation, it just basically everybody says watchmen, 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 watchmen. We get down to the Septuagint, and it just basically says very simply, Brenton's Septuagint translation, those of the children of Israel who secretly practice customs, not as they should have done, against the Lord their God. These are the occultists.
Against. Yeah, and it's interesting the word against as opposed to instead of saying for they are doing wrong things, but for God against God. That's interesting.
So the Nazrim are not nice people, and that's why when he says Nazareth, can any good come out of Nazareth? Is because Nazareth is associated with occultists. Now, for some reason, for some occult reason, which we can't uncover, somebody has decided to put the translation down here as watchtower, when actually the previous word, as it says, is from. Actually, the previous word has two words. It says from and the migdal, which means watchtower. And this word doesn't mean watchtower. This is Nazrim, which is occultists, which has been hidden, ironically, with a false translation, watchtower. So
okay, maybe it's a joke from the translators. They have decided to
it's like an in-joke.
Yeah, it's like anyone who can read this, they're going to see what we have hidden in here. It's like it's not something that you would even hide because it's embarrassing or it is wrong, or
no,
exactly. it's just like there is no reason to actually change that unless it's a joke.
There's literally no reason to change that. The ironic thing is that if you put this into translate, if I do a translate on this page, it'll actually translate the word as Christians, which is really bizarre. I can do that actually. Let me try and do that.
One of the things that I have noticed with Google Translate, I think probably I've mentioned it before, is that up to last year, when I copied things from the Quran into Google Translate, it would try to do a word-for-word translation, pretty much. But now it simply copies Sahih International, and sometimes it would, even in the translation, it would even add in brackets like "O Muhammad." It basically just copy-paste. So I wonder if you copy this, and there is something in the AI that is trying to understand the meaning of this word, and somehow it goes to Nasara, and it gives that as Christian because of something like that.
No idea, but it's because I think I'm going to explain, but I don't know why the AI is doing this. It doesn't even say from the tower; it just says from Christians, and then it still says there in English watchtower, but I put it into Google Translate for you just now. As you can see, it actually translates Nazrim as Christians. Really means occultists. And yet at least you get the point that these... So according to this Google Translate, in the 7th century BC, there were occultists who secretly did things against the Lord, and they were called Christians. Well, that's... Let's just be a bit careful when we are using...
Yeah, that's funny. When Google Translate is a little bit hit and miss.
Yeah. So that's a pretty odd translation there. So anyway, it literally means occultists. They're the ones and it's odd that it's actually hidden. And maybe you're right, that's an in-joke with the translators. They're actually hiding the meaning of the word so that nobody knows what it actually says. But these are the occultists. So the Nazrim are the occultists, and they're a sect of Jews who secretly did things against the Lord. They did not go to the temple in Jerusalem. They did not go to the tabernacle in Mount Ebal beforehand. Actually, They didn't really exist before that. They only existed after David. They are the descendants of David. That's what Netzrim means. Netzrim means scions of the house of David. When you put the Vav in, it's saying, well, they might be descendants of the house of David, but they're also occultists, and they have their own altars. And these were the kings of the northern tribes of Israel, which split off from the southern tribes of Judah. And there was a war between Judah and Israel, and these royalists of the noble houses of David in the area of Israel had their own altars where they put up many altars to different gods, to Baal and things like that, and they worshipped Baal, and they did things against the Lord, and they used to burn. We found their altars across the land of Israel. We found all of these strange altars, these foreign altars, these what we call foreign gods, altars to foreign gods, Baal and things like that. And they actually found traces of cannabis on their altars. So we know that they used to use drugs in their religious rituals, not like the temple in Jerusalem. And the use of drugs in their religious ritual is referred to in Judaism as kishuf, which is witchcraft, or is translated in the Septuagint as pharmakeia, which is where you got the word pharmacy from. So, which has got pharmaceutical. It's the same thing. So these people were using pharmakeia, that is kishuf, kind of a witchcraft based on using drugs, like taking magic mushrooms and all sorts of stuff like that to try and get this consciousness enhancement. Different from Jews and Judaism, where we use fasting and prayer and liturgy and self-discipline to get consciousness enhancements and visions and things like that. And we only do that in Yom Kippur. The Notzrim used drugs to get their visions, and you get a huge number of those people, of course, contacting this channel saying, "Wow, yeah, I love what you're saying; it's amazing." And I had been smoking marijuana, and I had a vision about this. It's like, well, I'm glad that you did. Unfortunately, you're never going to join this group because you're literally the Notzrim, and until you get rid of that kishuf, then you're never going to have a chance to enter the kingdom of heaven. That's what it says in the book of Revelations. Outside of the kingdom of heaven are those who practice pharmakeia. Actually uses that word, which means those Notzrim who secretly do things against the Lord. So, Notzrim.
If I may,
yes,
because they seem quite like an interesting group. Do you know how
to contact them? You sound like an interesting group. Do you know how to contact them? Do you have any email addresses? Sorry, what's your question? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
They sound like a lot of fun. No, what I'm saying is how widespread they would have been, because if it happens between the fight or the war between Israel and Judah, would there be say one tribe that goes down that path, or is it just individuals who is it very widespread that everyone will know about them, and they know they are kind of dangerous? Or would it be something like incredibly rare that people wouldn't know about them? Like, for example, there is this group of Muslims. I'm sorry, I forgot actually the name, but they are pretty much in the south of Syria, who are very much like occultist, like in the occult.
The ones who use the drugs? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, hashishin. So you get the word assassin from them. They use hashish to have visions and things like that. And that's interesting because you mentioned earlier when we were talking about this before the show, the word hashish sounds a little bit like kishuf. And is there a relationship? I have no idea. I don't suppose so. It doesn't have the same root. But interesting. One of the things of course, yeah.
So do you think that these people were located, say, in one region, and there would be just a tribe or two, or that it would be like something that every single Jew would know? Hey, those people, we know about them. They moved away from the path of the Lord, and you have to just keep away from them. Would it be very widespread?
Well, they were the royal house of the northern kingdom of Israel. That's who the Notzrim are. They were the royal house of the northern kingdom of Israel. All of the scions of the northern kingdom of Israel, who were described in the Bible as wicked kings, which is essentially all of them, until they were exiled by the Assyrians. And where were they exiled to? Assyria, which is where? Babylon, right? And so they were moved to the east, all of these people are called Notzrim. So it doesn't actually mean Christian, as Google Translate would have you believe. That's what the Google list remind there. It doesn't mean Christians. It's closer. It would be closer in meaning to anointed ones, really, or messiahs, if you like, because they were the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel, and they were the royal family of the northern kingdom of Israel, and they were moved to the east, and eventually later become the Nasrids. The royal. That's the same root. Nasra. Notsri is Nasra. Nosri. Nasra. So the Nasrid, which is a plural suffix to describe an adjectival suffix to describe the family of the Nasri, who were the royal family of the Lakhmid kingdom, right? They were the royal family of the Lakhmid kingdom. Those Nasrids were, by their very name, claiming descent from the royal house of David, and they were claiming descent from the northern kingdom, from the Notsrim as well. They were not Christian, but they later converted to Nestorianism. But not all of them converted to Nestorianism. And that's interesting because the Quran seems to be having a go at both of them. It has a go at those of them who converted to Nestorianism by saying God did not adopt a son, because Nestorianism is adoptionism. And it also has a go at them later on in this verse. I think I pointed at it earlier when I was talking about Rahman. This verse is having a go at them too. That's Surah 43, verse 81, where it says, if Al-Rahman, who I say means Jesus of Nazareth, had a son, then I would be the first of the worshippers of his son. This is talking to the Nasrids right now and saying, if you are the descendants of Jesus of Nazareth, because they claim that Jesus of Nazareth had a son with Mary Magdalene, then I would be worshipping you, the Nasrid kings. But no, Jesus didn't have a son with Mary Magdalene, and you're not the descendants of Jesus. So get lost. Basically, that's what this verse is saying. So it's a different group which is being attacked in this verse from other verses where it says that Allah doesn't adopt a son. Here it says have a son. Others it says adopt a son. Here it's talking about genetic descendant of Al-Rahman, and in the others it's talking about adopted children of Allah. So genetic descendant of Rahman is also meaning descendants of Jesus of Nazareth. So the Lakhmid kings, the Nasrid royal family, the kings of the Lakhmid kingdom, were claiming descent from the royal house of David. In this verse, some of them were claiming descent from Jesus of Nazareth himself, which is in keeping with a Judaic story about a wicked false Messiah who did claim to be the reincarnation of Jesus of Nazareth. And in the Talmud, we call him Ben Stada. And we say that his mother was Mary Magdalene. But he was not the son of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. He was the son of Mary Magdalene and a Roman soldier whose name was Joseph or Yossi, which is my name. And I wasn't one who did that, but it was somebody with my name, the same name that I have, was the one who actually raped Mary Magdalene while he was drunk, celebrating Saturnalia. I talked about this in another channel, in a show just earlier this week. And he raped her during Saturnalia because he was of the royal house of David, but he had become a Roman soldier and he was enjoying Roman holidays like Saturnalia. He was drunk. He went and he raped Mary Magdalene, and the child was Ben Stada. Ben Stada grew up believing that he was the child of Jesus of Nazareth because he was born in the year that Jesus of Nazareth was crucified. He was born after Jesus was crucified. He was born in the September. Jesus was crucified in the April or March, April. And this boy is born in September, October time. And so he believed that he was a descendant of Jesus. And he was of the royal house of David, just like Jesus was. In fact, Joseph, the Roman soldier who raped Mary Magdalene, was a stepbrother of Jesus of Nazareth and was the genetic son of Jesus of Nazareth's stepfather, Joseph. So Yossi, son of Yusuf, was the rapist father of Ben Stada. And Ben Stada no doubt had a dynasty, got married, had children, and there were people who claimed to be descendants of Ben Stada. So it didn't matter that Jesus of Nazareth was once upon a time, the anointed king of the generation, or somebody who could have been. When these Notsrim say that they follow the Messiah or they say that the Messiah is God's son, it means for them, the word Messiah simply means king. it means nothing other than the king. So that's why these Nasara are wrong, according to Quran, because they're basically saying the king is God's son. And they say that's wrong because they have to say the king, son of Mary, is God's son, not the king, not just the king. It has to be Jesus who is God's son, not just the king.
Right. That's why the Quran is always insisting so much, son of Mary, son of Mary. Everywhere it just keeps saying Jesus, son of Mary, and the Messiah, son of Mary, all the time. And then on this one is basically missing, but in the very next verse, it's actually saying Allah and the Messiah, son of Mary. So it's almost like putting it back into the narrative to make the distinction between here Messiah and the one in the next verse. That would make sense.
Yeah, so there you go. So Surah 9, verse 30 is just saying that these Nazrim, who are the sons of Israel who secretly did things against the Lord with their hashish, and they're sitting there with their shisha in their harims and just following a weird form of North Israel, not even Judaism, but it's kind of North Israel Baalism, are saying the king is God's son. And that's why they are in need of atonement. They are kafir. It says later on that they are kafir. And it says that they may Allah destroy them, and how deluded they are, because they just say the king is God's son. Which contrasts them with another group of people who say that Uzair ibn Allah, but that's another discussion which we haven't got time to get into, but they certainly aren't Jews. But these are the Judeo-Nazarenes, whose ways the Muslims are still following today. So when a Muslim is like criticizing a Christian, saying Nasara, 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 the irony in it is that the people who follow the ways of the Nasara, of the sons of Israel who secretly did things against the Lord, are actually the Muslims. That's the most ironic thing. And Odin Lafontaine is correct. Those Judeo-Nazarenes are the founders of Islam. But both they and Odin Lafontaine are wrong that they had anything to do with the origin of the Quran. The Quran is definitely trying to attack those people and correct those people and convert those people into Ansar. It wants to convert them into Christians and stop them from being wicked sons of Israel who secretly do things against the Lord.
Right. Well, if I remember correctly, so Odon's thesis is that there where it says Nasara, the Nasara are the Judeo-Nazarenes, so that would be great. The one thing that seemed to actually have been missing from the Quran is that the Christians are actually not being addressed at all. Now, if Ansar means Christian, then that is a huge move in the right direction. So I've made a note. I'll make sure that I'll go through all of the entries of that and see if I can find anything good, maybe things as well hidden with diacritics, as it happens a lot. When something reveals something, they will just add diacritics in a different way, and now you have a different word and you don't know what is going on. So I will certainly try that, and maybe next time that we have this conversation, we can talk as well about the couple of verses that talk about the Magians and the Sabians, because there are two verses that put, in theory, the Jews, the Christians, and then the Magians and the Sabians, which is like, no, this thing sticks out like a sore thumb. And by the way, I have just seen on the chat our friend Norman, who it would be great to actually have a conversation.
Econician? Well, felt welcome. Thank you for popping along. Peace, salam, and shalom to you too. There's a link there. If you want to click on it, Norman, you can click on and come and join us in the studio, have a chit chat afterwards. Or even right now, if you want to come in and say something live. I don't know how much of the show you heard, but I would be very interested to hear your opinions on what we've been talking about today. And would love to have a chit chat with you. Hopefully you can come on the show one day with me and JC, and we'll have a forum discussion on the things we have in common. So thank you for popping along. That's wonderful. So, we've covered an interesting. I hope I managed to clarify that this verse, Surah 9, verse 30 and 31, certainly does not refer to the disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. I hope I've opened the possibility, at least, that people will explore that these may have been. He's got a response. He says, "I would love to, but me and my boy have BJJ in 10 minutes." Okay. I don't know what BJJ is, but God bless you. I hope you will have a great time. All right. So I hope I opened everybody's eyes to the possibility that there are two different groups in the Quran, which one of them is translated Christians. They were definitely not Christians. They were just the Notzrim, who followed the king as a son of God. And the other group were the Ansar, who were the disciples of Jesus, who the Quran loves and likes and says nice things about them. Very different from the standard Islamic narrative. He says Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Good. Jiu-Jitsu. I like that. Jiu-Jitsu. Excellent. Make sure they study Jiu-Jitsu very hard. Okay, so yeah, I think that we went through that. Next time we should probably look at Yahud as well, because what is this Uzair ibn Allah? I've explained it on the channel several times beforehand. Again, puns are extremely important to understand the multi-level meanings which the Quran is giving. This is prose, and the puns are very important. Also, because it is of a Judaic origin, and Judaism is all about the pun. We love puns. It's just extremely exciting and interesting for us to make a pun about everything. And it's kind of a fun game that we do. But the sons of Israel who secretly do things against the Lord, they are the occultist Jews, if you like. They followed what we would call the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the Kabbalah of the Klipot. They did wicked things against the Lord. They were involved in hashish. You may find that a lot of the Islamic, not Islamic, they're not Muslim, but they are people who are from kind of Islamic culture, but they don't really follow Islam properly. They are all into their hashish. They love that. They're doing the shisha everywhere. And that's very reminiscent of this kind of group as well. So the Quran is against them. It's pointing the finger at them. They didn't write the Quran. They are the Judeo-Nazarenes. They're not Christians. They were, Odin Lafontaine is correct about them. They were the founders of Islam, but certainly not the founders of the Quran, which was clearly a mission among these people to try and convert them into a better way. Quran was very popular, but in the end, the ways of the Nasara survived, and the ways of the people who wrote the Quran died out. If you said Sabi, the Magians and the Sabians, we could get into those too. Sabi is very easy. It means Baptist, and that is again a reference to Hagarim, the ones who are baptized. Like me, I'm also a Sabi because I was baptized as a Hagarim, as one of the Hagarim. So if you are baptized into a Noahide from a Jew, then you become a Sabi, you see? So it's straightforward. Sabi is just another way of referring to the same Muhajir sect, or the Hagarim, the Ansar sect, the Hawariyun sect. That's just another word for the baptized people. As for Magi, that's interesting because it's the same word which is used for Majus or Magi in the New Testament, and we have some Magi who came to venerate Jesus when he was born, and we have other Magi like Simon Magus, who is a wicked teacher who does wickedness and tries to purchase with money the secret of the name that the disciples are healing in the name. So Magi is very much like that, the same use as the word in the New Testament. Some of them are good, some of them are evil. Interesting enough, reference of Magi here, Majus, the Magus, that's the word it's used, Majus, it uses a singular form. Al-Majus means the Magus. And the Magus here is another way of referring to Ben Stada, Magdalena's son. Why? Because they say that he studied under Simon Magus, and he was the successor to Simon Magus, and so he became the next Magus. So Majus, the Magus, is another way of referring to a king claiming descent from the son of Magdalena. And I believe that the Magus is also used even today as a term for kings in certain parts of the world. I think they might be people who claim descent from Solomon, and they call themselves the Magus. I think. I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to look into that. If somebody knows what I'm talking about, please make a comment below in the discussion section and clarify the situation for me. I'm pretty sure that I have come across this phrase of the Magus as a reference to, or it might be the Nagus. Maybe I'm confusing it with the Nagus. I think that might be I'm confusing it with the Nagus. So maybe I'm confusing it with the Nagus. But if it's correct that there is a kingship out there who is still calling himself the Magus, please let me know. Or Majus, please let me know. All right, so we've covered that. Anything else to do or say?
Well, I'd say that, yeah, those verses would certainly make sense if they were descriptive of groups in the Judeo-Christian sense, as opposed to how it is now, which the Magians are supposed to be the Zoroastrians. It's like that is a completely different ball game. So it seems to actually stick out. So we can certainly go through those words as well. And just the other day, yes, I'll tell you this as a point of interest. I had a quick word with Adam Seeker, and I mentioned about baptism in the Quran, and he actually pointed me to the translation of Yusuf Ali, who, because he's a little bit older, he translated parts in the Quran as baptism, like the verse that says, "Who baptizes better than Allah?"
Right.
And now in Sahih International and so on is different. But I found it interesting that until quite recently, they had no problem using the word baptism in the Quran, which is a big no-no.
No, that's right. Sibgatullah means basically dipping or baptism. And it's the same root. Tsab is the same root as tsabi. And in fact, even in the earliest hadiths, I mean, I could open up hadiths on the show now, but Sabi is another long discussion. But I can open up hadiths where it literally calls the founder of Islam the Sabi and his followers the Sabi'in. So they were baptized people. They were Baptists, baptized Noahides, which is essentially what all of Jesus' disciples were. They were originally Jews. But you see, you and I, right, for example, you're a non-Jew, I'm a Jew. And so there's maybe a distinction between us, right? But if you became if you said, okay, I keep the 7 laws of Noah, and then you decided, I want to become a baptized follower of the 7 laws of Noah. I want to be a disciple of Jesus who's baptized. And I say, yeah, no, I'm going to get baptized as well onto the Derech Eretz. And then we both become Sabi. I'm a Ger and you're a Ger, and we're both equal. There's no difference now. There's no Jew, there's no Gentile, there's only us, you see. So, and we're kind of more closely aligned and united because we both have the same yikus as Ger, right? So in the modern day, Judaism doesn't baptize people because the state of Israel has a lot of power and a lot of pressure on Jews and says, we don't want you to go baptizing everybody unless they're full converts to Judaism, get circumcised and keep all the laws of Torah, etc., blah, 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 because we're not going to give citizenship to Gentiles who've just gone and got themselves baptized, right? That's basically the rule. Okay? And so because of that political situation, Jews don't baptize people, or if they do baptize people, they will only baptize you as a full convert to Judaism, not as a semi-convert, or what we call a Noahide. They don't baptize Noahides anymore. And if they do baptize Noahides, then they do so without the recognition of any of the other synagogues which respect the state of Israel and follow the rabbinate of the state of Israel. In other words, groups like Neturei Karta and things like that. I will baptize Noahides, just to push my agenda here a little bit, because I don't hide my agenda, unlike other people. I don't hide my agenda. So if you do want to become a baptized Noahide, I will baptize you as a Noahide, and then you will be a Ger just like me. But you will be a Ger of non-Jewish origins, and I'm a Ger of Jewish origins, and then we're both united in the same path, the same yikus, and that's nice, isn't it? Because there's no difference between us. And there's no difference between Jay and me right now, as we both have Santa hats on, because it's that time of year. And I hope that you will all have a blessed and holy time. So we have a few comments here. It's somebody saying thank you. Thanks. It's great timing for me to learn this. Baruch Hashem, I'm glad that you learned it, because he says, I want to get more links like this, please. Oh, well, I would love you to get more links like this. So, I don't know, send me an email. You can write to redjudaism@gmail.com. You can also write to peterchamor@gmail.com. Chamor is spelled Chamor. Peter is Petter, petterchamor@gmail.com, or redjudaism is much easier to remember at gmail.com. And you can ask any more questions you like. And especially if you're interested and you say it's great timing for you to learn about this, maybe the baptism thing, then let me know and I'll tell you more things. Fundamentally, we don't want you to become Jews when you're already doing exceedingly well as Noahides. Carry on as Noahides, carry on as Gerim, and just do the right thing. and let's make the world a better place like this. Because converting to Judaism as a Jew, wow, that's tough stuff. It'll take 7 years for a start to get even the basics. And once you've learned all that and converted, you realize, oh, I didn't have to do that? Right. You mean I had a higher level of holiness as a non-Jew who was upholding the 7 laws of Noah and encouraging Jews to keep the mitzvot? I had a higher level of holiness than I'm ever going to have as a Jew? Yeah, that's right. That's right. Isn't that wonderful? If I knew this when I was a secular person, I wouldn't have gone down the path of Orthodox Judaism. I would have gone down the path of being a Noahide. But anyway, here I am, and I am a Noahide, but it's a different kind. It's called a Ger Tzedek, as opposed to just a Ger or Ger Yagur or Ger Toshav. But you can all be baptized Noahides as Ger Toshav. Interesting, there's a link between Toshav and the word Sabi as well. So there's an article on this on Wiki Noah website if you want to read through it. So next time, hopefully we'll get through and talk about one of these different groups, either Yahud or Majus or Sabi, and we'll go into as much detail as we have on this show, which is already 1 hour and 50 minutes, and we have got to go. So God bless you all. Thank you for watching, and have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.